Some other characteristics of the preoperational stage is the tendency to have imaginary friends. If you were in my face-to-face class, I would ask for a show of hands of how many of you had an imaginary friend, and I would raise my hand in that process. 65% of preschoolers have imaginary friends. They're more common among firstborn and only children than children with siblings. So since there's no one, we're not in a face-to-face class, I'm going to tell you my personal story about imaginary friends. So when I was growing up, I had a sister who was 10 years older than I was, and 10 years really in family situations usually ends up being almost like another generation. And so she was not someone that I played with when I was growing up. And when I was about 3 or 4 years of age, which she would have been 14, and certainly not interested in anything that her 4-year-old brother had to say. When I was 3 or 4, I developed a imaginary friend whose name was Petchy. Don't ask me where that name came from. I don't know. That was the name that I called him. And Petchy went everywhere I went. When I ate dinner at night, or whenever we ate, Petchy would sit at the table with us. He would have food that he would eat as well. Sometimes in the conversations at the table, he would have things that he would want to say. Of course, it was me translating for him. Everywhere I went, Petchy went. Um, um, in the latter part of probably of being around 4, my younger sister was born. And this is, and those of you who remember this from Psychology 200, this was a flashbulb memory for me. I remember this. I was in the bathroom with my father, and I had finished using the bathroom. And of course, whenever I went to the bathroom, Petchy went to the bathroom. Everything I did, Petchy did. And I went to the bathroom, and then I got off of the commode, and I guess Petchy was going to the bathroom. My father flushed the commode. And I said to my father, "You have flushed Petchy down the commode." But what I remember about that memory was that there was not a lot of sadness associated with that. So why do you think it was at that particular point in my life that it would have been okay for me to let my imaginary friend go? If you're saying it's because you had another sibling who came along, then you're right. That there was somebody else in the house who was closer to my age who I could spend time with. So if you have a child who has an imaginary friend, don't think of that as being an unusual thing. 65% of preschoolers have imaginary friends, and children with imaginary friends tend to be less aggressive. They tend to be more cooperative. They tend to be more creative than children without imaginary friends. They tend to be better able to concentrate and focus their attention. And they tend to be more advanced in language development because what if you have an imaginary friend, what are you doing a lot of your time? You're talking to your imaginary friend. And if you have an imaginary friend and you have toys, what will you do with the toys in your imaginary friend? You will play, letting your imaginary friend play with the toys as well. That's going to increase your sense of um, of cooperation. Um, and egocentrism. So at this particular point, children believe that um, everything they know, everybody else knows it as well. So it's difficult for children at this age and they're going to learn about this a little bit later on, but it's difficult for children at this age to try to keep secrets from mommy and daddy because they believe that if they know it, mommy knows it. They many times they don't have what's called a theory of the mind. And this is another example of the conservation measure, another conservation of number idea. And again, why can't young children conserve? It's because they can't reverse their thinking. They can't go back like with the 2 ice cubes. They can't go back to when one ice cube was frozen and or both ice cubes were frozen. They can't remember that. Why don't they understand that the 6 coins in one row is the same as 6 coins in the other row, because by the time you have moved one of the rows of 6 coins apart so that they're separated, children can't remember that. And what you see is reality to the pre-operational child. So when it comes time for Halloween, preschool, pre-operational children 2 through 7 are likely going to, for the most part, if given a choice about what they're going to dress up as, they're not going to dress up as a monster. They're not going to dress up as a vampire. Now, maybe their 8, 9, 10-year-old brothers and sisters will do that. And maybe in some situations, if their older brothers say to them, no, you can't be a superhero because that's a stupid thing. We want you to be a vampire with us. Then kids might do that. But in the absence of that, if you say, what do you want to be? They're going to choose something benign. They're going to choose to be Superman or a superhero of some sort. Little girls are going to choose to be a princess or a queen or something of that sort. They're going to choose to be things that are not frightening, in part because children have the belief that if I look like that, maybe I'm going to become that. Because reality it's sort of the last part of the sensory motor stage at some level. Remember, in the sensory motor stage, children went and interpreted everything by their senses and if they could move it. And so if it looks like this, it's got to be that. Now, sometimes you'll see children who, if you've got one of those really involved parents, an involved father who's going to take you out trick-or-treating, and he's going to dress up like Dracula, or dress up like Frankenstein, or dress up like something scary, then sometimes he'll dress up like that, and then he'll go to the children and kind of go, "Ooh," and children will kind of sometimes just scream in sort of mock terror. But there's a little bit of reality to it, because they know it's daddy, but it doesn't look like daddy, and they're a little scared of what that really might be. So we've talked about Piaget's ideas. Let's talk a little bit about a man by the name of Lev Vygotsky. Lev Vygotsky was, I think I mentioned him before, was a Russian psychologist who believed that children learn in a social context. You learn to tie your shoes, you learn to fry chicken, you learn to change the tire on your car. Usually, for most of us, not by ourselves. Someone shows us how to do that. If you watch any of the DIY programs on television, typically the pronoun that they will use as they're talking to people is we. In the cooking shows, now we add our flour. Now we stir in the chocolate chips. Because it's based on a Vygotskian idea that we learn in a social context. We don't learn by ourselves. We learn in a social context. This is in contrast to Piaget, who believed that we are little scientists and we're experimenting on our own. So 2 aspects that you need to know about Vygotsky's is the zone of proximal development. And zone of proximal development is the point at which children need help. So if we look at tying your shoes, the difficult part about tying your shoes for most people is making the bunny ears and wrapping it around and flipping it and pulling the 2 bunny ears tight so that the knot stays tightened. That's the zone of proximal development in that. For people frying chicken, the zone of proximal development may be, when is the grease hot enough? Or when is the chicken done? Those are things that often people don't know. And so what we learn in a social context, so adults will use a skill called scaffolding. And in scaffolding, they will go and talk to us. Sometimes they will do the task with us. And we'll watch them and we'll learn from them. And so when you're teaching a child to do any skill, according to Vygotsky, it should be a combination of both showing them what to do and talking them through it using relatively simple language. We do this, and then we do this, and we do this. And Vygotsky would have said, and I think I mentioned this to you folks before, Vygotsky would have said that one of the ways that you work with children in terms of learning without frustrating them is that if a child says, help me with this, the first thing you want to say is, show me what you can do. Now, they may say, I can't do any of it. But sometimes, like the situation with tying your shoes, they may be able to make that first loop under and pulling tight of the two ends of the laces. They can do that. Then what you know is that you have to help them with the bunny ears part, or the frying the chicken. Show me what you can do. I know how to get the meat prepared. I know how to put it in the bag full of flour and shake it up down and get it so it needs to be. I know how to put the grease in the pan. I don't know how to get it hot enough. And then they're going to let you know, and it will make the learning experience for that child far more satisfying, and for you as the teacher as well. So scaffolding. So adults use scaffolding to promote independent performance. And you can see here, looking at your current competence and moving toward potential competence, it's a step-by-step pattern. You're not going to do it all at one time. I don't know about you folks, but I think when I learned to tie my shoes, it took me a while to do it. It wasn't something that somebody just sat down one day and said, here, do this. I had to do it bit by bit. I had to do it over time. I mean, and because I couldn't do it for a while, people would say, listen, we can't work on this so much right now. I'm just going to tie your shoes so you can go on to school or whatever, and we're going to continue to work on it. Vygotsky has also an idea that education, and there's a lot of truth to this, education should be viewed as a collaborative, bi-directional learning experience, that you're working with somebody and information is going both ways. They're telling you things, you're telling them things as well. So in Vygotsky, language scaffolds all learning. Scaffolding is that ability. This is the scaffolding where you're teaching them a little bit every time. You're adding more to their knowledge base by showing them and talking to them. So language is what's really important. And what's eventually going to happen is children are going to learn, they're going to develop the use of inner speech. So when I moved back to this part, I lived in New York for a while. I moved back to this part of the country. And when I was living in New York, I, like many people, did not have a car, because it's just really expensive to park cars in New York. And so I came back here, and I was driving to college one day, and I heard this noise, which I first thought was a helicopter. And then as I rolled the window down and paid more attention, I realized, no, you've got a flat tire. So I pulled the car off the road, put the emergency brake on, got out, put something behind the wheels to keep the wheels from rolling, and got the tools and the spare tire from underneath my truck. And as I was doing all of those things, I was talking to myself, and I stopped and paid attention for a moment of that. I'm a psychologist. I'm interested in things like that. What's that talking? And what I realized was that was my dad. Those were my dad's words, because my dad had taught me how to change a tire. And so I was using his words to help me in that process, because he had scaffolded me in terms of changing a tire in that particular way. If you want to be an effective scaffolder, you want to be able to work with somebody, the first thing is it has to be a secure attachment. That person has to feel that you want to help them and that you are helping them. The second thing is, for any larger cognitive challenge, you want to break it into manageable steps. So you don't want to sit down with a child and say, we're going to learn how to tie your shoes today. You want to just do it bit by bit. Show me what you can do, and then take it from that step and go on. And you want to continue supporting them until the concept has been mastered, and then you can move on.